Tell me what the initial inspirations were when you put pen to paper for Nor'easter.
Well, when I first started working on the project, I knew that I wanted to make something that would showcase Maine in winter. I'm from Maine originally. I was born there and went to high school there, and wanted very much to make a movie that showed the place in its winter environment, which is really harsh and really difficult to live in, but it's also really beautiful at times. And I wanted to make something that was quiet and still, and that would create that sense of patience and reverence that I think the state's natural locations make very easily. And so, I tried to craft a story around that environment and that kind of tone that I wanted to achieve. I was also really influenced by a film critic and professor in Boston who, his name is Ray Carney, and he had written a series of essays about what was most important in film, and he turned me on to a lot of different film directors that I saw incorporate their own lives and their own worldviews into their narratives instead of just making stories that felt more made up or felt more like contrived. And one of the big things that I kept in my mind when I was first starting work on the script was to write about something that I didn't completely understand, was that I would choose a topic that would allow me to investigate and develop my own interests. Mm-hmm. And that was really, really quite an exciting idea, because basically every day you're not simply dictating things you already know or things you already think, you're wrestling with ideas. And so you're addressing new concepts, new ways of thinking, and new worldviews that other people share that you might not share. So I decided to write about religion, which was something that I didn't really know anything about, and to try to incorporate that into that wintry Maine landscape that I knew for sure that I wanted to photograph. And so by doing that, I was able to learn a lot about what I thought, what I believed, and make a story that I hope goes at that in a complicated way.
Well, a couple of quick questions about what you just said. The instructor that turns you on to kind of the more personal films, and directors, who are some of those directors?
Robert Bresson was definitely the most sort of striking and influential one. He's the director of The Diary of a Country Priest, which is probably the most influential film on this, on my own film. And Ingmar Bergman, I mean, he's somebody that I knew of and who I had seen a few of his works, but really didn't understand just the depth of his work and the number, just the sheer scale of his work when I first started working on the script for Nor'easter. But I mean, he's turned me on to all kinds of filmmakers that really you wouldn't see their influence in this movie, like filmmakers like Andrew Brotzman or John Cassavetes or Elaine May or Mike Lee or Mizoguchi, Tarkovsky. I mean, people who just showed me that film could be something else than what I had seen. And when I was working on the movie, I was, beginning my work in researching film, but I really just didn't know the depth and the breadth of art film in any way. And so he turned me on to a lot of directors that led me to many, many, many more. And it was sort of that one seed, that one starting point that turned me on to all kinds of things. And of course, I'm still pursuing that.
Actually, when I watched your film, I was thinking about Bergman, because there was something about. I mean, first of all, the subject matter, the kind of the questioning of spirituality and faith, but also the tone of the movie. And you said it earlier that it kind of a very deliberately paced, very patient.
Yeah, there are a number of things that Bergman does that were huge influences on me. And one was that he explicitly addresses religion without making films that feel like they're preaching to the choir. So he makes movies that talk directly about Christianity, spirituality, faith, God, the devil, sin. He explicitly addresses all of those things without feeling like you are watching somebody who already understands the message that he wants to deliver, and you feel like the characters are not simply mouthpieces for a single point of view. That was by far the biggest influence that Bergman had on me. The other was that deliberate pace and the way that he uses photography to create a sense of magic. And so when you watch his films, you feel as if they are addressing the real world while also taking place in a very heightened cinematic world. And that was a huge influence on the film, no doubt about it. So Nor'easter is, a very narratively driven film. In fact, like the plot, I feel, the plot has its oddities to it, but it has these elements that feel also very conventionally structured. So, there's a main character. We know who the main character is. He has a want. Those things all exist. But the way that it's photographed is intentionally designed to create a sense of heightened realism, a sense that, like, the world is a place where a miracle can happen. It's a place where something divine can exist. And that was certainly influenced by Bergman. His Winter Light trilogy is definitely one of the cornerstones of my cinematic education, and it's the set of his movies that I've gone back to the most by far. Winter Light and The Silence especially are both movies that I have seen countless times, and that their combination of realism and surrealism, and like I said, that heightened sense of reality that creates a world that feels like accepts magic, that was something that I definitely wanted to create.
And so when you said that you that the world of religion was not something you were necessarily accustomed to, how did you go about acclimating yourself to that world?
Well, I read a lot, and I went to church, and I spoke with people who were religious. I spoke with actual, priests, and we had a number of people who helped out in getting the religious aspects of the film correct, making sure that it was doctrinally acceptable and that the look of the church was, and the wardrobe, of course, was good. But we had a religious advisor. His name's Jim Martin. He is, is a fairly well-known Jesuit. He appears often on the Colbert Report. He's the religious advisor that shows up. I'm not sure if he is Colbert's actual minister. I think he might be, but he shows up on the show pretty regularly and has published a number of books. And he was very friendly, very supportive, very helpful, and he met with our lead actor David Call and went through the script with him page by page to make sure that David knew what he was doing and understood the processes that he had to go through on a daily basis. And he also talked with David a lot about just what the life of a priest is like, how really isolating it can be, and how poor churches really often are, and how the combination of those two things makes life for priests quite difficult in a lot of ways, very isolating and lonely in a lot of ways, even though they're doing, community building work. They often live lives that are really quite lonely. And so he helped to get that idea into the script and helped to make it so that we understood the pace of that person's life, As far as my own reflections on it, that really was just about reading and going to church. So sitting in churches and asking myself questions about the way that I felt about certain things, and then asking myself about how I thought about images of the Bible, or doctrinal rules, or the way that the church itself is designed, or the priorities that are created by the architecture of the church, those kinds of things.
So, but the big challenge would be, when you're investigating characters that live in this world, not to alienate necessarily any of your audience, and yet not to be too cynical about faith.
Yeah, I'm not cynical about faith, and I was not intended to create Nor'easter as a critique against religion. At the same time, I'm doing this with both eyes open. Like, this isn't in no way something that preaches to the choir. And I think, speaking about Bergman as an influence is hitting the nail right on the head. If you can watch a film by Bergman that deals with religion and sin explicitly and enjoy that movie, then Nor'easter is a movie that you can enjoy. I mean, that's certainly the way that faith is handled. But I definitely wanted to address faith in people's lives in a honest, direct, open way. You know? So, is this a movie that is cynical? No, in no way. I don't think. But of course, anytime you deal with religion explicitly, it's going to bring out some very strong emotions in people. One of the things I thought about a lot when I was writing the script was, or not when I was writing the script, but when I was choosing the topic for the script, was the things that we as writers can use to create strong emotions. And one thing I tried to think about was, what is it that gets people worked up? And the more I thought about what it is that gets people worked up, the more I became convinced that people get worked up when you address their identity. And like one of the things, so then I asked myself, like, what are the things that that define the identity? I think the simplest thing that defines identity is gender, and then race, and very soon after that you get to religion. I think you'd probably be maybe third or fourth on the list. You know, your religion, whether you're atheist, agnostic, or of a particular faith, is basically what you use to define your relationship to life and death. And that was a really surprisingly, to me, it was very surprising how much of a defining element that was to everybody that I knew, the more that I thought about it, and how the way that people perceive religion and or the way they perceive life or death is very, very closely tied to who they are and who they perceive themselves to be. So that was something that I got a lot out of. I got a lot of mileage out of that, writing about a character who holds that in his hands. Was very powerful. Yeah.
So tell me about because the film has received great notice, but especially for its photography, as you alluded to earlier. Tell me about the conversations you had with your cinematographer about the world you wanted to create.
Well, there were a lot of them. Ian, our cinematographer, worked on the movie for over a year. We talked always in terms of script and character, and we tried to make sure that the location choices that we were making and the environment and the time of day and all of those things were indicative of the character's location in the world and his perception of the world at that time. So, for example, there's a shot very early in the film where the priest goes to a frozen pond and the camera tilts down from a close-up of a branch to sunlight to and over the shoulder of the priest looking out onto the frozen pond. That shot was originally scheduled to take place at a completely different time of day, but when we arrived on the island and knew that we had to shoot that shot, Ian was able to execute the schedule based on the time of day to take advantage of that angle of the light. So that is one of my favorite shots in the film, and it's actually not lit. There are no movie lights, there are no bounce cards, there's nothing in that shot. It's simply a camera on a dolly. But that was a situation where Ian was so fluent with the script and the schedule that he was able to say, okay, this shot should be done right now. Even though we didn't schedule it to be done right now, we should change the schedule right now and do this shot right now, because if we do it right now, we're going to be able to get this kind of light at this particular angle and time of day, and it's going to look great. And it's one of those things where, because he was so fluent in the script, the need and mood of each one of the scenes, and like I said, the schedule and the time of day, and just the practicalities of making the film, we were able to take advantage of that. And that was really his doing. Like, I am a very organizationally minded guy, but his production knowledge trumps mine by a lot, just because I'm a writer-director and he's a DP, works in production a lot more. So he was able to just to prepare me for things that I didn't even know I needed to prepare for, really.
In terms of the major challenges of directing, one of those challenges, would it be the kind of establishment of tone and in terms of performance, to making sure that the pitch of each performance is in balance with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely trying to make sure that everybody is in the same movie. There's no doubt about that, and it's definitely easy to get away from that if you're not careful. If you don't have a sense of the tone and pace of the project, things can definitely get away from you because you have as many actors as you do. Many of the actors never meet, and so they, in a sense, they're in different movies. They're in different scenes, working with different actors about different things. And they never really need to consider other elements of the film. So it's definitely a director's job to know that unity and tone and pace, and to know how things relate to each other, not just how they work on their own. So that's a very important part of filmmaking. And for me, it is definitely done by design. I definitely try to think those things through from the beginning. I try to imagine every element of the film as best I can. But yeah, in the moment you are performing, directing is a performance in a way that acting is also a performance. You have to respond to what is happening in front of you, or else you will sacrifice quite a lot. You have to be able to accept what is in front of you, respond to what is happening, and change your plans to adjust to achieve the best version of the thing that you have in front of you. Your plan exists so that you can fall back on it, but it is not the golden standard. The golden standard is the actor in front of you, basically.
Yeah. You have to be present for the moment.
You have to be present. Yeah, you have to be able to look up. Yeah, like one thing that you have to do is look up. It's just like you have your script in front of you, you have your plan in front of you, you have the monitor. You have to be able to look away from all of that and just look at what is in front of you and respond to it intuitively, and to know your subject matter as best as you possibly can. And just, if you know your subject and if you are confident, then you can respond to it to find something that is better than what you could have planned for. But if you don't have that sense of preparation, then you simply won't be able to distinguish between good and bad. You won't know what is appealing or not. And another thing that can be very bad is that something can happen that seems very appealing but is actually inconsistent with the whole. And so if that happens and you go down that rabbit hole chasing something that seems good on its own but doesn't suit the larger thing, you're either making the movie worse or you're shooting something that won't be in the film, and that's obviously a waste of time. So.
When you have screened your film, what kind of conversations come up from it from the audiences?
Well, that's one thing I've been very proud about, is that the reaction of the film has addressed the film, and that people have responded to the ideas in the film in a very direct, honest, and open way. And that's really the goal of the movie, and that has certainly been a big success. One thing that I don't really enjoy is during Q&As. Is seeing Q&As be filled with technical questions or budgetary or schedule things, things that are ultimately I think are trivia, but what people really have been doing is engaging the ideas in the film and how it made them feel and their relationship to these topics in the real world. And I guess nothing is more important to me than that. It's just that people are engaging the topic in terms of the way that they see others and the way that they see these subjects playing out in their daily life. And that really is the goal of the film. So if we talk about the movie being a success or a failure, that really is what it is. It's just, does the audience recognize that you are trying to accomplish something true, meaningful, relevant to the world, instead of creating a shell game within the film world that may or may not, quote unquote work, but doesn't leave you with a sense of meaning or knowledge or something that you can apply. I try to think of filmmaking as a really practical exercise, something that you're engaging in an idea that exists in a practical sense in the world, and that I think has been a big success in the film, because during the Q&As have been about faith, the conflicts inherent in faith and practicing faith, the nature of sexuality, the complicated relationships that people can have that surround abuse and trauma, the need for love, the need for grief, misunderstanding between people, young and old, the bizarre relationship that exists between the priest and the boy's father, in which the older man knows much more about the religion than the priest himself. You know, those are the kinds of things that are coming up in the Q&As, and they're very satisfying. You know, it's very good to hear them.
Yeah, well, you're hitting on some universal nerves. I mean, a lot of these topics are things that all of us have to grapple with at one point or another in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I talk about something being real, that's what I mean. I'm talking about like something that exists in your life that does not exist in. That's what I mean when I talk about many films feeling like shell games, where it's like they have a narrative engine that works, but it works to what end? Like, it works to accomplish what? And so what I'm always looking for is to address that and say, okay, well, what exactly are we trying to accomplish, and is this thing worth doing? Is this thing true, and is it an experience that people can dialogue with? Like, a lot of my favorite film critics talk about watching movies as ways of dialoguing with themselves, ways of sorting out the world, and I definitely feel film has been like that for me. So this is an effort to continue that.